This is Britain, where those who describe themselves as fond of animals...
How about world events and that sort of thing? Do you keep yourselves informed?
Not very much, no.
There's no doubt about it, Mr. President. You have had the worst international press of any president I've known.
So, the meeting. A half-naked man on your
No, it was not totally naked.
Before we get to that amazing meeting, where was your life going at that time?
Not very far.
Your expectations on yourself, how you thought the next few years were going to pan out if
I
Alan
don't
hadn't
think I
arrived.
ever thought like that. I lived in the moment.
And what was that moment like? What was happening?
I think I'd been actually quite ill, so I was fairly relaxed. I was helping my old ballet teacher. I wasn't very good. I was always telling the children to do the wrong stuff, and she got quite cross.
Because you trained as a ballet dancer?
No, I did ballet from the age of about 8 till 16 or 17, but I was never good enough. I was quite good at the acting part. I wasn't very good at the rest.
Really?
Because my limbs are not flexible enough. Also, I was probably too short.
When you say you were good at the acting, where did that take you?
Not very far.
But you thought you could,
No.
if not dance?
No, I enjoyed the dancing, I enjoyed the music, but I was never going to make it. It's not a happy profession. It's a very unkind profession. Yeah. It's unkind to your body. It's probably unkind to yourself because there's a load of rejection involved, and it's only a very small number of people who actually get there. We have visitors.
Did you ever think about a career in television, broadcasting?
No,
film?
I actually thought of a career in journalism because I enjoyed that.
What journalism had you done prior to
I got in at the very, very lowest level, working for a business magazine which was owned by Michael Heseltine, but in a very, very lowly capacity. And then I was ill and I had to leave. And so when I met Alan, I actually was pretty well drifting.
So you were writing for magazines, you were a journalist, you were
I wouldn't even put it that far. I think there's no need to exaggerate.
You had a byline?
Not even that, the lowest of the low. But it was. I thought that it was a foot in the door. It probably wasn't. It was more like a foot in the lift with Michael Heseltine going up to the top floor. If I had my greatest wish, yes, I would have written and I would have been a journalist. But I wasn't. And also, it is a different time in life where one's ambitions were not extraordinary.
So that's where you were, aspiring journalist
No,
with a...
no, fine. I'm going off to teach my class of 8-year-olds, as I say, to point their toes in the right direction. And I go downstairs and there is this quite attractive man in a dressing gown trying to make the hall telephone work, which I know hasn't worked for at least 6 years. And we speak and I say, do you want to use the phone in my parents' flat? He says, why are you still living with your parents? You're far too old for that. And I think, what a very rude man. And so we go upstairs and I set him down. He has a nice piece of chocolate cake and a coffee, and I go off to my class. And as I go out of the door, he says, oh, will you go to Harrods and buy me a teapot? I thought, okay. So I go to Harrods and I order the teapot. I come back and put a note through his door saying your teapot won't be ready for 3 months. And that was that. Go to my room, and we had a housekeeper at that stage. And she came banging on my door and she said, you better come out, that man's back. He looks a lot better with clothes on.
So what I'm taking from that was quite attractive, very rude, but you agreed to buy him a teapot. Why did you agree?
You just do. You just do. Years later, I said to him, what on earth was all that about a teapot? He said, I was so frightened I'd never see you again. I had to ask you to do something.
So it was the first thing that flashed into his brain. How can I hold this person in my life a bit longer?
His previous girlfriend had left taking the teapot. And a lot of his books, which had upset him very much. He said looking at his bookcase was like looking at somebody's mouth with their teeth knocked out.
So he was older than you, a few years?
25 years.
25 years. And he was at that time, because he'd come out of his relationship, his engagement with Olga, was living a bachelor lifestyle.
It had only just, I think the parting of the ways had been gradual and very, I think, it had been an exciting relationship, but quite an upsetting one, because although I thought she was wonderful, she had a lot of emotional problems and a very complicated and unhappy childhood. But she was an amazing person. She had worked for Schweitzer in Africa. She'd been a barmaid in Tahiti. She had done some remarkable things, but she was distrait. And I think she was bulimic before people understood what bulimia was. She was addicted to Valium. But she was if she hadn't been born into the wealth that she was born into, she probably would have had a much better life. Anyhow, I thought she was remarkable and I liked her. But I think Alan had to choose between his work and looking after somebody who was emotionally quite handicapped.
And his work had shifted from Lime Grove to Yorkshire Television, based in Leeds.
Exactly, exactly. And that, that also meant that he was on the motorway twice a week. I think he was happy, but she was not. She was not really a very happy person. But as I say, she was remarkable in her own way. And I always hope that history will be kind to her, because she deserves to be recognised.
How did an encounter with a man who looked better with his clothes on develop into a romance?
He invited me for a drink to his flat, which was the flat above my parents. And there was the chairman of Yorkshire Television, and they were talking about prospective programmes that they were going to make in Europe. And they very flatteringly asked my opinion, and I gave them a couple of ideas. And I think they were quite surprised. And his chairman was someone called Ward Thomas, who's a very tough character. And I remember Alan saying to me, well, what did you think of him? And I said, I think he's the toughest person I've ever met. And when he's finished with you, he'll throw you away like an old Kleenex. And he went, huh? Anyhow, it sort of went on from there.
So he knew you had this rare perception about people.
Well, Alan was very bright about people. I don't think he knew initially. I think initially he thought he'd picked up this 22-year-old who conveniently lived in the flat downstairs, or as he said to me charmingly one day, I won't even have to get you a taxi. It did progress, but I wasn't expecting it to progress. He used to give me a lot of champagne, and I used to tip it into his plant pot, because I'm not a great drinker. Finally, we sort of did get together.
Very soon from that point, you were collaborating with Alan. You were involved.
No, it took a little while, because I don't think he really did think I was a 22-year-old nit. So it took a little while to realise that actually I was quite a useful nit. Initially, I was a useful nit in as much as I could go and book books for him, I could go to the library for him. If he went to a punch lunch, I could drop him in the city, hang about and pick him up so that he could have a drink. So I was a useful nit.
So you were a kind of runner, researcher.
Well, I wouldn't even go that way. Don't make me into something I'm not. Just don't make him into something he's not.
I want to get, later on we will talk about misconceptions about Alan that need to be addressed. But let's talk about the films where you were.
Bearing in mind, this is early 70s, and the way women worked, or women were expected to work, is quite different.
It really strikes me that women throughout history have done work which they have taken to be support, that they would describe themselves as being supportive. In fact, what they are doing all through history is doing the work.
Well, I think it's a lot of picking up the pieces. But also, I was always aware you can't have two people in the same house striving for the same thing. And I was very happy. I was very happy always to help him. And also, it taught me a lot. It taught me everything, more or less everything I know, in many, many ways. I mean, we didn't always agree, but I would. You don't. I deferred because he did know. He knew what he was doing. There were no expectations. You had a jobette, and then you married someone from the same sort of background and had children. It's a different time in life. It's a different time in the century. It's a different time of everything. So you can't try and look at it from today's point of view.
But you could have gone to university. You could
No, I
have.
was far too lazy. I hated school so much that I didn't want to go to university. I was so unhappy at school. I mean, the other thing I had wanted to do was go to the Courtauld Institute and do history of art. But in order to do history of art, you had to have been to a university first. I don't think that figures today.
Right.
And I wasn't going to do that.
Just because the idea of studying.
No, I think I didn't realise that university was freedom rather than slog and being controlled.
Because that's what school was like.
Yeah, hideous.
I'd like to talk through your memories of some of the programmes where I know you were very present, that you were on the team and that you travelled with Alan. I believe, correct me if this is wrong, that the first one was Harold Robbins.
The first one was Harold Robbins. I think because Harold Robbins had a sort of reputation with women, and I think he probably quite wanted to say, well, I've got one of those. It was fun. He had been doing a series in the Caribbean, and he flew me out to New York, and I had to wait for him at the airport. And he was horrified because I was talking to all these people, and he said, "You don't do that." And it was the first time I'd been to New York. And we stayed at the Plaza Hotel, and it was very exciting. We went to the Plaza, and then we went to a hotel called the Elysee, which at that time was very much favoured by writers. It had little corner suites. So we had one. They're at it again. He had one. Hal Robbins had one. And then there was Tennessee Williams underneath. And I was supposed to be we were in the corner suite, and I was supposed to be hidden from the crew because I was, my cameraman doesn't bring his wife. I mean, that lasted about half a day. When there was some sort of emergency, and the crew burst into the bedroom and found me lying on the bed thinking, what's that? So after that, all bets were off.
How did you introduce yourself at that moment?
I don't think I did, actually. I was horrified. And we had a few dramas because the director and the researcher didn't get on. And there was a moment when the director hung the researcher out of a 7th floor window with the researcher saying, "Put me down, Peter, I think you're unbalanced."
Is that Peter Richardson?
No,
No.
it wasn't. It wasn't. So there were always a few dramas going on. And Harold was one of the things that was one of the first things I did for Alan, because he wasn't going to read this rubbish. So he gave me all the Harold Robbins books to read, which put me off soft porn for the rest of my life. I never, ever, ever read rubbish and soft porn again. And I remember him saying, well, I was supposed to write what I thought. I said, well, the only thing I can say is this man hates women.
And that's your opinion that stuck?
He didn't hate me. He was absolutely lovely to me. I mean, he wasn't the most attractive man in the world. He was incredibly nice to me. He was always taking off his jacket if I felt cold, helping me across the road. And there was a girlfriend at the time who sort of looked like a hooker. And he kept saying, "You'll never guess what she does." And we go, manicurist? She is a store detective. Yeah.
So you didn't guess store detective?
Well, would you? Anyhow, she was given a one-way ticket to Spain because she was too distracting. The publishers gave her a one-way ticket to Spain, so she was off. Anyway, he was, as I say, he was charming to me. It couldn't have been nicer.
What did he see in you then? That
I think I wasn't a store detective.
well, you were both there to work, you know, and he came from a background where he was having to be in a very different world from the one that he...
No, he was not. His manners were quite extreme. There were various wives, and then there were masses of girlfriends. And he said quite charmingly, well, I always send them to the gynecologist before I go any further. Just check them out.
Very charming. You mentioned being put off soft porn forever, which brings me to Plato's Retreat. Which
Yes. Well, a very deeply unsexy place that smelled of popcorn.
What was it billed as?
Well, it was a swingers club, and that was one of David Green's ideas, which is fine. So I do remember going in there, and the first thing they did was say, "Oh, sit here," and they put on this film. And I just thought it was rather stupid.
To get people in the mood, kind of. That was
no
meant to be the idea.
Anyhow, I had David on one side and the researcher, who was a sort of Bronte-type, governessy sort of person who wore tweeds and sensible shoes. And she was not very comfortable, and I just thought it was rather silly. And I think then we went back, and they had all these people in a jacuzzi, and I was supposed to be taking the photographs, and I actually wouldn't do it. I told Alan he had to do it himself.
Because you were the official photographer for a lot of these.
Yes,
shoots.
but that was a problem because I hadn't got a union card, so it didn't go down very well. But I mean, Alan hated having a huge crew because he said, you know, we walk in mob-handed, they think they're going to be kidnapped. And he wanted intimate conversation. He didn't want this great, huge following.
And you got that.
Yeah.
And where did you learn your photography
From
skills?
him.
From him.
From him. Which is mostly a lot of pictures of Alan that I took. You see him going like this, you're in the wrong place. But he was actually the most tolerant, I have to say. He was so good and so tolerant. If I interrupted him mid-flow, he never complained. He was amazing, because I wouldn't have been like that.
He could just pick it up and carry on.
And also occasionally if I was helping him and I made a mistake, he would just say, doesn't matter, darling, we'll do it again. Very gentle, or never lost it. And I think that's a great talent, because you have an awful lot of things to think about, and you have quite a lot of stress. But he was so easy to get along with and so easy to work with.
And one of the things it seems that you shared was a great sense of humour.
Yeah, he was very funny. And the saddest thing to me is when your film is overlong, the first thing that go are the jokes. The jokes and charm goes, which is always sad. No, he was a very funny man.
When's the first time he made you laugh?
He always made me laugh.
So David Green was a young buck producer, director, went on to work with Alan and you on 27 films. But at that time, Plato's Retreat was phenomenal because it was going out on primetime TV.
Yes, I gather there was a porn version that went round Yorkshire television. And also I think Paul Fox, who was a really nice man, but rather quite straight-laced, I actually was appalled when he saw it.
So there was a kind of boys, there was a lads version that had...
I never saw the lads version. There was an orgy room which Alan went into, which was full of mattresses, and he took his shoes off, and I just said, I'm sorry, I'm going to burn your socks.
Another extraordinary programme, particularly for the time, was the Lord is My Shepherd.
Yeah. Well, that he made when I first knew him and I wasn't working with him. And he showed it to me and it made me cry. And he was thrilled to bits because he knew he'd really hit the mark.
At what point did you cry?
Oh, it's the end. The end where they're singing and it's very passionate. And funnily enough, looking at it again last night gets to me still. Yeah. I think it's wonderful.
Yes, this is the point where the minister is talking about 30 who died when their church
I
was
think
torched.
even last night I could feel it, and he was absolutely thrilled when I cried.
He knew that he'd got winners. Yeah.
But it was a time where it was supposed that if he could make a film about gays that was so positive, he must be gay himself. So when he was doing interviews, I was rather marched round with him.
Was that a managerial decision? Or?
It was his decision.
Do you remember the reaction to that film at the time?
I think it was very positive. But I mean, he directed that film because the director was himself gay and didn't want that film made and tried to stop it. Contacted the chairman of Yorkshire Television and tried to get him to stop Alan from doing it. Alan just went ahead and did it, and the director put himself to bed for the entire shoot. And was then, when it was a terrific, phenomenal success, was rewarded by Yorkshire Television with a new car.
His name, the director's name, does pop up as in the credits at the end. So
indeed. Well, they were always very scared of him because his father was something big in MI6.
Okay. And that was generally known. Oh, hello. He lives on. He's come back as the next door neighbour's dog. Palm Beach is another favourite.
I love Palm Beach because it's fun. It has no social message to give us, apart from little old ladies having fun. But it was very funny. It was funny. It was fun to do, and it's another era.
Some of the best lines in it.
How can I lie about my age when my son needs a facelift? Actually, my favourite was a little old lady who used to go out with enormous jewels on, and she was hugely wealthy. And Anne said, are you not worried about going out like that? She said, no. She said, no, of course not. I have a bodyguard. So it was quite a different deal.
In the Palm Beach film, one of the tour de force pieces to camera has Alan walking and talking.
Yes, that was one of mine.
Tell me about it.
Well, they had all these ladies of a certain age had so many cosmetic operations that Palm Beach, they, how can I put this? Their reaction to the passing of time was, well, that was the year that Madame had a facelift. That was the time Madame had her bottom ribs removed in order to create a wasp waist. That was the year that so-and-so went to Paris and had all her blood changed. And so he did this walking piece to camera with the stuff that I had sort of gleaned, and it was a fun piece.
Were you similarly involved in the film about Marbella?
Yes, I mean, Marbella was, I like the entrance, I like the intro to Marbella, because I think I don't know how much I had to do with that. I can't, I'm afraid it's quite a long time ago.
I just remembered the glamorous shot of you two walking together in your Terry O'Neill dress. You had...
No, it's not a Terry O'Neill dress, isn't it? No, that was a freebie. That was a freebie from my friend Franco, who'd made it for a fashion show. And luckily I was thin enough to be able to get into her models.
From where we are speaking at the moment, it's difficult to imagine just how incredibly famous Alan was. Just
Well, bear in mind, in those days there were, first of all, only, to be very beginning of his career, only 2 channels, then only 3, then only 4. It is before you had a worldwide choice of what you looked at. So it's another scene altogether.
and the interview was king. I mean, somebody who could interview as well as Alan was.
Well, I remember Michael Grade saying, when I schedule Alan as entertainment. I don't schedule him as if he was Panorama.
How did Alan feel about that?
Delighted.
Because he was getting audiences of 15, 16, 17
Yeah, no,
million.
it's amazing when you think about it. I mean, as a child, we were not encouraged to watch television, but we were encouraged to watch Whickers World.
How interesting.
I remember seeing his program that he did about Monaco, and he was talking about Aristotle Onassis, who he said was a small man, but very, very tall when he stood on his money. And I thought, how rude.
You thought that as a child?
Yes.
So Alan was official. He was allowed, there was an educational aspect, so you were allowed to watch Alan where you weren't allowed to watch, I don't know, Z-Cars or popular drama.
Yeah.
Because this was proper.
No,
It
but
was
I think
proper BBC television.
I remember Michael Gray saying, a Whickers World was an event. And it was. Also bearing in mind, at the beginning, people didn't travel that much. I remember Alan saying he wouldn't do it. But he said, when I started, I could have hung the camera out of the window and driven through Singapore, and that would have been the program, because people didn't know about these things.
I believe these films do now sell very well on on video.
Exactly. Absolutely zilch effort.
Yes, just the trip of the number 9 bus, there is actually a fan site for it.
Exactly.
Yes. But the flip side of that opportunity and having the world as your oyster is that the world was looking in, and as somebody who I perceived to be essentially a shy person, I imagine that was difficult.
I did start off dodging behind pillars and hiding and so on. And he said, look, if you're in this, this is the way it is. First of all, if somebody interrupts you when your fork is 3/4 the way to your mouth, that's the way it is. It is the people who put me here, and it's the people who can take it away. So you are always smiling, you are always going to be, not difficult for me to be smiling. So that was fine. And I also, as you know, don't like having my photograph taken. And he used to say to me, look, I do not care what you do, but try not to pick your nose.
Anything else is good. Were the times when...
Oh, I'll tell you one Palm Beach story which stayed in. Sorry about this, only since I didn't tell it properly last time. We interviewed the editor of the Palm Beach Daily News, which was 10 pages of people at parties, which went up 2 or 3 times a week. And she was a very nice woman. She said, well, I have to have very tough sleeves in my jackets because people are always pulling on my jacket because they want the photograph taken. She said, there was a really nice man. He wasn't really very wealthy by Palm Beach standards. The only thing he had was this picture, which was a rather small Utrillo. And he used to take this around with him. He had a little case with a painting in it. And we thought this very funny until we actually filmed in a terribly grand house. And in the cloakroom, there was a rather small Utrillo. And this was our joke. And we used to say, he's a terribly nice man, but he's got a rather small Utrillo. And under great pressure to take it out, we left it in. And Alan got about 20 letters after saying, what is a rather small Utrillo?
Did you tell him? Or that's your...
We kept it.
We've talked about the difficulties of being so famous. What were the great pleasures? What were the...
Oh, it was wonderful. I mean, one is privileged. One is totally privileged, and you must never ever take it for granted. And you must use that privilege to other people's advantage.
And you have done that? I mean, you fought for the foundation to exist.
I hope so. I hope so. I mean, Alan used to talk about Whickers luck, and felt that that luck should be shared with other people. And it's very difficult to try and make a documentary today unless you've got a famous actor or a comedian who doesn't know what they're talking about, travelling around the world at great expense, talking rubbish. And he just felt, give other people a chance. So that's how it emerged.
The final years, what were the best bits of the...
Oh, Whickers War, I thought was an absolute triumph. Because he always felt that he was not the story. He was telling the story, but he was not the story. And in this particular instance, he was the story. And in fact, he was an incredibly interesting and interested man. And in a way, it was probably a pity that he didn't give more of himself, but that was not him.
And you persuaded him to do that, didn't you?
No, I didn't. It didn't take much persuasion. Somebody came to him and said they had a commission from Channel 4 and they wanted a journey. And I thought that was a good journey.
Why?
He'd written about it in his autobiography, and he wrote about it very well. And I noticed that a lot of his friends would say that's the most interesting part of the book. And it hadn't occurred to Alan that it was the most interesting thing. But there was something there. There was a nugget of interest there. Also, what it did was he had an enormous postbag afterwards, and a lot of it was from the children of people who had been through the war or had been at Anzio with Alan and just said, my father never talked about it. None of those people who came through, they never talked about it. It was a part of their life they just put away in a box, and they never discussed it. Alan didn't discuss it greatly either. It was just something that happened, and they didn't want to talk about it. So, in a way, it opened up a conversation for a lot of families.
Did he talk much about Korea, where he was a correspondent?
A bit, yes. I mean, he was in Korea with Randolph Churchill, who he said was completely impossible. Alan actually got along with him. You've got a bee on you. I'm sorry. Careful. He said he was much younger. He was a very young correspondent to be in Korea. And he said Randolph Churchill was awful to everybody, but was actually nice to Alan because he reckoned he was very young, so he must be quite good. Also, he was very drunk, and Alan used to write his copy. I think he was working for the Daily Telegraph. Alan used to write his copy. And Alan always had a very good phrase. He said, I respected him because he was as rude to the ambassador as he was to the waiter.
That's the other thing I love about Alan, is that he had no need to kowtow to anyone. And
well, he was the same with everybody. I can remember big in Hong Kong where we would be royally entertained in a huge style. And then he was having something made at the tailor's, and the tailor, he didn't like the buttons. And so we went off button hunting with the tailor, and we went to some dive to have lunch, and he was just interested in what the tailor was doing and how he was getting on and how his family were and so on and so forth. He had no side.
he had a wonderful relationship with his tailor in...
Oh, that was a different thing. That was Doug Hayward, who also dressed Parky. No, I mean, and Sean Connor. You name it, he did it.
Things that you most miss now, not sharing your daily life with Alan?
Just the companionship, the daily to and fro, but one can't look backwards. It's quite damaging to a negative. One has to appreciate what you had and what you learnt from it, and go onwards.
And the thing you most learnt for going on with?
I couldn't. Look, it's just look. We were melded to each other. We were part of each other's lives. It's not really a question. Sorry.
I'm very interested in what you're carrying forward of Alan now in your...
I think one of the things that he gave me, which I really think was wonderful, he gave me confidence, which I didn't have before, and he made me realise that I could achieve things, and he also he liked me to write, and I used to say, I can't do this. He just used to say, just get something on the paper. It doesn't matter what you get, just get something on the paper. When you come back to it tomorrow, it's always better than you thought, and then you play with it, and you do this, and you can do that. Never use a complicated word when you can use a simple one. Keep it simple. And I wouldn't have thought I could do it if he hadn't made me think that I could do it. So that was a wonderful thing to give me. He gave me confidence. He did a lot of things for me. So and for which I'll be grateful for the rest of my life, what is left of it.
And you're going to keep the diaries that you wrote?
We'll see. We'll see. I laugh when I read some of the stuff. It's very funny.
Go on, give me for instance.
I think I've only read a little. There's so much there, and also I got him to dictate diaries. Every night he would dictate what he'd done. I would say if he did that, he didn't do that until about the last, I don't know, maybe 10 years of working. And again, they're fascinating too, because it's his eye of what exactly was going on, and exactly what he did, and how he did it, and what he thought. And they are terrific. I only found them the other day, and they're absolutely marvellous.
Wow.
No, I mean, I think it was a few days ago, I was reading our little visit to the Playboy Mansion to watch the Oscars. And there is Raquel Welch's husband. And I say, what does he do? Oh, he fucks.
And this is all in your handwritten. Are they handwritten or did you type?
Oh, no, they're handwritten. Don't put your hand in that pool, you catch something.
So it's very raw, it's in the moment, it's as it happened.
Exactly. You can't do that afterwards. It's gone.
From the 60s?
No. Again, one of Alan's other things is you have to write exactly what you see at the time. Because if you wait, the elephants in the street, by tomorrow the elephants in the street are normal. So you've got to get it, as soon as you see it, you've got to get it. Otherwise, it doesn't. It loses the interest. You've lost it.
Exactly. And when you were being dictated to by Alan, were you typing then, or again were you just writing it down longhand?
No. Well, initially I didn't travel with him, and I think he suddenly thought, "Crikey, what's she going to do while I'm away?" And at that time. There were courses you could do run by the LCC, which was the London County Council, and they cost about £2 a course or something. And I looked, I thought, oh, this is marvellous. Oh, fantastic. So I put down short story writing, watercolour painting, fabric printing, psychology. And he took one look, he said, no, you're going to do typing and cooking.
He did love your cooking.
Well, he didn't to begin with. I think the first meal I supposedly cooked him, I really couldn't cook. I'd never made a cup of tea in my life because I don't drink tea. And he said he realised he was serious when he actually drank the tea.